Didn't care about me. Not about me, Gene.
What's that?
Welcome everyone to the Public Works Committee meeting. Let's begin by approving the minutes of our previous, Mr. Bruno,
I'll wait.
Mr. Strainer on the second. All in favor of approving the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Next item. Kevin, which one do you want to begin
I
with?
think we'll start with the railroad,
Okay, let's
or
begin
with the Public Works, Parks, Recreation, and Railroad.
Public Works Recreation Road. So what do we have in front of us now?
I'll turn it over to
Yep,
Dean for
the
the
first-
first one.
Dean?
Yeah, the first item is to request an extension of the contract with the City of Glens Falls for the utilization of the West Mountain parking lot for maintenance by the county and for the snowmobile club. It was, last resolution was 355 of 2023, but it is for the purposes of that.
Okay, we have bring this to the floor for consideration. Mr. Strainer on the motion, Mr. Bruno on the second.
Yes.
Mr. Bruno on the second. Any discussion?
Yeah, where's this property? The one in West Mountain?
West Mountain.
Yes,
parking
one of
lot,
West
yes.
Mountain.
Want to make sure.
Yep.
This is something we've been doing, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for many
you can,
years.
Extension,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
All right, then. There being no further discussion, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of this extension signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Next item we have on there is under the information for discussion and review. First one I'm going to discuss real quick is the railroad washout update. Have pictures here. These are several of the locations that were in the Thurman area that had washed out. You can see they're just about done. In fact, I believe, is it today?
Today or tomorrow,
Today or tomorrow, they will finish up the Thurman area and they will move north to the Riparius area. But I'll show you the pictures. You see how extensive the damage was there, but they're just about repaired with the Thurman area, and then they're gonna move up to Riparius. We figure by the middle of July that they'll be done with the Riparius area as well.
As a committee knows, this 600 and some odd $1,000 worth of repairs, it basically extinguished our reserve, and we also had to transfer funds from our fund balance, county fund balance to cover this. Kevin?
I'm hoping to come back to committee on the contractor continuously out there. And remember, when I gave that number, that was the worst case scenario. So I'm hoping to come back to the committee to tell you that we did not use all of that funding.
That would be,
But I will let you know after we wrap up Riparius.
that would be wonderful.
Yes.
That in fact happens.
Who was the contractor?
Hal Raven.
One more time.
Hal Raven was the
Hal Raven.
contractor along with the Regal Construction, Regal Brothers Construction.
Okay.
Next item we have on there is something that you, Chairman Supervisor, that our Chairman Conover had asked for during our last meeting. It was kind of an update on where we are with the railroad. And I believe Robert's here to kind of give us an update.
Yeah, we had, and maybe some of the board members that maybe weren't here, the last action of the Warren County Board relative to the railroad was a resolution, I think, to basically abandon it as a railroad use with the Federal Transportation Group. And is that correct? That was in 2019, December.
Yeah, 2019, we were looking at it, it was going on, the case in front of the Surface Transportation Board at that time was brought by the New York State, through the DEC, brought a case to abandon that stretch of railroad from North Creek up to Hawes to the end of the line. They filed a petition with the Surface Transportation Board to have that piece of rail track abandoned. And it ultimately, the railroad entity that owned it, the Saratoga North Creek Rail, which the county also had a contract with to use the county train tracks to provide passenger service and holiday service on. That company went into bankruptcy out in Colorado where it was based. And so eventually a trustee got appointed, and the trustee sold it to, ultimately the rights to use that section of track, sold it to Revolution Rail. So the STB was kind of holding that whole abandonment in limbo until the bankruptcy case was finished. And then the state withdrew the abandonment petition when Revolution Rail purchased those track rights up there. That section of track was taken by the federal government in 1942 in World War II to build the tracks from just past North Creek where the Warren County owned tracks and all the way to the mine into Hawes to get it material from the mine for the war effort. And that taking only lasts for 100 years. It was renewed in 1962 by a court decision. So there's a 100-year period from 1962 to 2062 when those tracks now are owned by Revolution Rail. In 2062, the property on which those tracks were located is going to revert back to whoever the owners were in 1942 and their heirs and successors. So a lot of that property is New York State property, so that's easy to figure out. The property that's not New York State property, that's going to be a mess, but they'll have to deal with that in 2062 to figure out who has rights to the property at that time. But the county-owned tracks are Warren County's tracks. That's a different matter, that train track. They were built a long time ago. They started to try to build them back in around the 1850s. A few companies, it was the Lake Ontario and Hudson River Railroad Company, originally intended to build it from Saratoga up into Essex to the old Adirondack Iron Works, and then across the Adirondacks and coming out just past Watertown at Sackett's Harbor. That didn't happen all that way. That business went under. There was the Adirondack State Railroad Company, which came along. It was also going to try to build a railroad that way. They failed, and a lot of them went under. They took out mortgages, took out loans. They failed, went into receivership. That property was sold to some individuals, and Albert Cheney and Enoch Rosencrantz were two of the big property owners. That property then was sold to the Adirondack Company, which is the one that actually built the railroad that the county has now, started it in the 1860s and completed it to North Creek in 1871. And that's as far as it went at that time. It was operated for a while by Thomas Durant. And he sold it to his son, William Durant, and another fellow, William Sutphin, who owned it as the Adirondack Railway Company for several years, to about 1882 or so. And then it was sold to the Delaware and Hudson, and that's who owned it all the way through in different iterations. The company had changed some names. They became the Adirondack, not the Adirondack. They took over the Adirondack Railway Company, but still ran it under the Adirondack Railway Company name until it merged with the Delaware and Hudson Company, then formed the Delaware and Hudson Corporation, transferred the railroad to the corporation. By the 60s and 70s, the railroads were having problems everywhere. And the tracks here too, that the county owns, went through a few different owners. There was a company called Derico, that was a holding company of another railroad that acquired the county's tracks for a while. That tried to consolidate with Conrail, that fell through. Eventually, they got purchased by, well, for a while, it was actually owned by the company that bought the rights to be called Pan Am. It's called Bureau of Transportation. They bought the rights to use the Pan Am name and logo when Pan Am Airways went out of business. That company owned it for a while. Then they put it into bankruptcy, the railroad, and then it finally went to the Saratoga and North Creek Railroad, well, which is the one that the county ended up doing business with in around 2016 or so with a contract, well, actually earlier, 2011 or so, with a contract to provide like a holiday service, tourist trains, like passenger service on those tracks, which operated for a while. And then that one kind of went under too. And then we had a lawsuit by the county against that railroad for the fees that the railroad owed to the county, for fees it owed on property taxes and use. And we did get a little bit of money out of that from the bankruptcy. The county's probably never going to recover the rest of what it owed, but it did get a fair share of its money paid from maybe all of it. I can't recall exactly, but it did get money back from the sale of it in bankruptcy to Revolution Rail. And that's kind of where we're at now. So the county owns these train tracks, and it's up to you folks to decide what the county wants to do with it. I mean, it has options to sell it. Any sale has to be approved by the Surface Transportation Board. It has to be approved by that. It also has to give notice to some other entities. The New York State Department of Transportation, Commissioner of Transportation has to know. There actually is in the state law that they have an option of like a right of first refusal option, actually, whether they want to buy the train tracks or not, or assign that right to another municipality, which it could do. Also, too, there is a contract with Revolution Rail till December 31st of 2028 for Rev Rail to use the contract, to use the tracks for their rail biking business. So any discussion really needs to include them as well. If the county wants to do anything prior to 2028, you got to include Rev Rail in that, and they might ultimately be one of the best buyers anyway. Who knows? And the county could keep the tracks and maintain them and keep them as is. That's going to be a cost to keep them up to par to operate. I mean, there's federal and state regulations on that. The FRA, the Federal Railroad Authority, has control over safety. So there's things that Superintendent Hajos knows have to be done to keep those tracks operable and up to federal standards for it. If a railroad did want to come through and use these tracks and run trains up to the Hawes, we would have to allow it, but the county would get a fee for using its train tracks. But you can't prohibit, you can't put a gate on there and say, no, nobody can come on here, because it's part of the national rail network. Railroads have to be allowed to use it.
And what was the, do you have the copy of the resolution the board passed?
I don't have that immediate.
Just summarize what the resolution stated at that time. I believe it was to basically abandon the right of way dash petition to the Surface Transit.
It was supporting the petition of these, of the DEC on that case in front of the Surface Transportation Board to abandon that section, support the abandonment of that section of train tracks above North Creek up to Hawes. And then also too, I think the sentiment at the time was that if that abandonment was granted, that Warren County would be interested in seeking abandonment of its section of train tracks that it owns. But I was told by an attorney at the STB that if the STB didn't grant abandonment for that section of track from North Creek to Hawes, they would definitely not consider Warren County's request to abandon its section of tracks.
And that's quite an encumbrance. Anyone that owns it, to have that possibility hang out there like that for railroad purposes, that, you know, how you operate it, how you maintain it, at what standard. It depends heavily on what it's being used for. Mr. Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question back at the meeting was, you know, is this something the county should own? And I'll go to, first of all, what was the cost roughly for repairs currently?
600,000 for the current.
600,000. What's our annual revenue? Does anybody know? Probably 100.
$100,000 a year.
Yeah, so. The county, you know, and this is not the only instance that's gonna confront us. There's 600,000. So again, my point is, this is something, a burden the county should own, because it is a burden to taxpayers. So. That's my consideration, concern.
I will add on. I'm not sure whether it's, you know, whether we should get rid of it or not, and that's a decision for you. I will just say that when we had Saratoga North Creek Rail there, or we had Hudson River there previous to Saratoga North Creek Rail, they were performing all the maintenance on the track. They were performing the maintenance, the culverts, the ditching, the trees that came down, repairs to ties. They would replace ties and rail. That was all being performed by them when they were here. Once those rail companies were gone, there is nobody performing that type of work on the tracks. We certainly, as part of Rev Rail's contract, have them checking culverts. If there's smaller trees down, they're required to remove, but most of the majority of the people that are working with them are college students, taking people on, you know, bike trips up and down the rail, not necessarily knowing what is right and wrong with a culvert being blocked and such. And the perfect example, and to add on, our Parks and Rec department and any of our equipment is no longer set up to be on the rail. We don't have a high rail truck. We're beholden to, you know, some contractors that may have them that we can go up and down the tracks to see what it needs. Dean, and when Tim was in there, they'd have the guys walking 40 miles of track, and they'd be walking, you know, with chainsaws and such, getting on in certain areas, and that, because that's all we could do. So, without us having a company in there doing the normal maintenance like the rail companies did, our track's deteriorating at a rapid pace. A very rapid pace, and that's just reality.
And then the infrastructure, not just the railroad, the bed, but you have bridges. Different things that run into the stratosphere in terms of
They
cost.
do, yes.
Just one of those bridges, if one of those bridges becomes unsafe for any reason, are we prepared to replace that bridge? Are we prepared to, if the answer to that is no, then are we prepared to remove it? What's the answer to that? I mean, I think that there is these 40-something miles, it's a lot of infrastructure there. I mean, I don't want to put a dollar tag on it, but it's a lot. And so now the question becomes going forward, what do we do about this right of way going forward? And you do have your user on the right of way, which is a good thing, of course, and it's important to the community that benefits greatly from that. Johnsburg, of course, is important for them. That said, it seems to me that if we're going to keep it and maintain it, we have to set our public works department up with the proper equipment and whatever to be able to, the proper resource to be able to maintain this corridor. And that's going to come with a price. And if that's the option that we're going to pursue, then, they have to be able to travel the corridor. They have to be able
Well,
to
yeah,
do the repairs.
minimum, you need that high rail vehicle, because that's a long stretch to be walking and carrying equipment, et cetera. So that is a minimum. I'm not sure what the cost of.
Yeah, I'll add on, I certainly have it in for budget for equipment this year. I've had Dan Smith, who's my shop manager, reach out to several manufacturers to see if we can equip our grade all and at least one truck with high rail equipment, so we can go up and down the track. The grade all for ditching and clearing some of these culverts, and the high rail truck just to be able to do inspections, not for a vehicle itself, but the equipment that we can attach to the vehicle. So that certainly will be part of my budget number this year going into budget season.
Your guys, do they do rail repair too? I mean, who handles that part of it?
That we typically have to contract out. We would, even with some of this equipment, like grade all and such, we wouldn't be able to do the tie repair. We just don't have the equipment to be able to, and that's a significant cost. The ballast machines that they have come in to tamp the ballast underneath the tracks, they're $400,000-$500,000 piece of equipment that if we're using it once or twice a year, that's not going to be worth us doing it. So it's easier for us to go to a contractor with that type of work. But type of work that they're performing for us now, if we had equipment to stay ahead of those washouts or culverts being blocked up, we wouldn't be making those repairs.
Right, that's where I was at. Okay.
And the maintenance is, for rail purposes, is questionable. I mean, you can repair that bed without having to repair the tracks, but if we're repairing the tracks as well, there's that additional cost associated with that. And I mean, I assume that the reason that we're doing that is because of the bikes use it. And so now the question becomes, well, what's the long-term expense structure on that? I think it's significant. Kevin?
Yeah, currently our track is rated as a class 1. Yeah, class 1 or I forget, I mixed the numbers of class 1 or class 3, which means a train can run at 10 miles per hour and no more. 10 to 15 miles per hour, and that's it. We had when the train came up for Maple in April, we had them with inspectors check from Antone Mountain Road up to the Hadley station, but that's it. The rest of the track has not been inspected for any of that. So from there, it's still rated as that class 1 or class A at that 10 to 15 miles per hour, but the rest of it, I don't know.
And that's, I mean, if we're going to maintain this, if we're going to continue to own it, maintain it for recreational purposes, which would include snowmobiling and hikers and everything else, I mean, it has to be properly budgeted. Because now you're dealing with public safety after all, and environmental issues too, in terms of washouts. So it's I think we need a plan going forward, and we need a plan of action, and we need to know what our options are going forward in this regard, and that's going to take some time and energy to do that. And there are issues associated with that as well. And I don't think we should be naive, to think that there aren't issues.
There certainly is gonna be, as I just indicated, there's certainly going to be things put in the budget for more maintenance work on the track and having that equipment upgrades. So the maintenance budget, which has always been low for a railroad, is going to increase this year. That's what I'm proposing in my budget.
And I think that in terms of any contracts going forward, I think that we have to give more attention to, who's responsible for what relative to those tracks. It's going to be a continuing issue. And again, my concern is there's infrastructure there that if it has to be repaired or replaced, comes at a very, very high price tag. Are we prepared to do that going forward? I mean, I don't want to, any one of those bridges, 3, 4, 5 million.
The Sacandaga Bridge would be 11 million alone.
Well, let's start with that one. What's our attitude on that? We prepared to.
What kind of shape is it in?
Well,
It can still run that class 1, 10 to 15 miles per hour, but if anybody was to do, not that we're doing freight, but as Robert alluded to, that if someone was looking to haul out to Haas for any reason, we certainly can't stop them, but we can certainly try to have them perform those repairs or work ahead of them using the track. But that's part of the track that was inspected up to Hadley Station, so that certainly is still rated in the same rating that we've had on the track forever. But it's not in great shape. Not in great shape.
But that's the question, Dave, is we need to know the life expectancy of that. I mean, at what point do you have to put a barricades and say, no crossing, period? I think that's where we're at with this now.
Yeah, you need to determine the condition. Yeah, with respect to freight or whatever, somebody who's authorized to do that needs to look at that and say, and develop a report, status of each of those bridges, because, probably, and I don't have much better than I, those bridges, I don't think they're gonna fail catastrophically. I mean, if that happened, you've got bigger problems and other agencies are gonna get involved, but certainly somebody should evaluate them, give us a report, and we could take it from there as to what may or may not require repair, supplementing, what have you.
But under our existing lease arrangement, we're responsible for the maintenance of the repair and maintenance of the track.
Significant, yes. If it's again, to go back to the Rev Rail contract, if there's small brush, small trees, things like that, they're responsible to remove that. They're also responsible for checking our culverts. Now, actually, I'll let Dean talk to it, but Dean has worked with Sarah Frankenfeld over in planning to create an app for the individuals that are part of Rev Rail, that they can go out, snap pictures, all the culverts are located on there, so they can show us what type of shape they're in, and it's instant, I believe, or through an email to Dean to know what's going on at the track. But again, they're not doing, when we had Saratoga North Creek there and we had Hudson River there, they were equipped with the maintenance equipment to do the work on the track. Rev Rail is not.
Yeah, so what, I reached out to Sarah and Amanda because there really wasn't a lot of communication, and because of the amount of regrowth and the stage that the track was going, we really do need to get eyes on it as soon as possible in the areas that we don't always spend a lot of time, as we do not have access to it. So very simply, we created an app that can be used through GIS and on a web browser. It indicates culvert locations that were already assessed, mileposts, so we can at least have a decent reference to go assess a location. And the primary purpose initially is to get after the culverts. That's one of the issues. It wasn't really a river issue, if you don't mind, but it's, when you have saturated soils, and that has an impact on the bed, that I do know. But this was the first step to go after this. The issue we had here with these washouts was because of that, was the lack of water, stormwater management in those sections. So, but anyways, now with this app, at least we will get reports back from their crew. Granted, they may not know exactly everything about it, but we can get snapshots of what the conditions are. We can address issues as they come up.
So effectively, if the culvert fails or is blocked for any reason, that's when the major storm events begin to erode the.
Yeah, we never have an issue, and that's one of the things that we were talking with our contractor about doing the work, and they were talking about this big, you could see it in the pictures, this big, setup of heavy wrap and stone fill on the riverside. We don't have an issue on the riverside. Our issue is on the culverts underneath the track that get, the river's never coming up and washing out our track. It's the culverts that are getting blocked from debris. And again, if you're not going down there with a grade all or something like that and cleaning that dishing out, that material just doesn't have any place to go. When you all are aware, one tree crosses a culvert or blocks a culvert and the water backs up, all bets are off. The water's over the top of the track, and that's where the track erodes away.
So, I mean, I think going forward, I think we need to give more thought to this corridor and but I think we should expect that budgetarily that there's gonna be a much greater allocation of resource just to maintain.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that a user contract with like Rev Rail, there's no way they're gonna agree to undertake maintenance. Like you threw a $600,000 bill at them for maintenance, they say, see ya. We're just walking away from this. So my point is, it requires us as a county, as the owner, of that to give careful consideration to what we want to do and how much do we want to expend going forward.
so there's gonna be, there may be need to be some additional, not only equipment, but some manpower here as well. This is not a minor undertaking.
It sounds like the preventative maintenance is going to stop the big costs, right?
It should, for the most part, yep.
Yeah, I think that's going forward, that's where it's gotta be spent.
Okay. Any, yeah,
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think what I should do is come up at least with the options, get with the county attorney and talk about the various options we would have and what those options would give us or the costs associated with some of the options. And who can say no? Like, is it NTSB can say no? Is it the Department of Homeland Security? Is it the DEC? In each one of the related options. So I'll take that one.
okay, good. All right then. Thank you, everyone. I should have offered, I didn't in the beginning, privilege of the floor, anyone wishing to address the committee? Pleasure.
Just a question, does anybody know how much Rev Rail actually makes in revenue? Is it a public company? Can we find that out?
They provide us. They provide us their ridership. They provide us a ridership. They do not provide us the cost, but you can get a pretty good assumption based on what they charge, based on their ridership, what they're making.
Have any idea what that is?
I don't. Somewhere in the vicinity of a little over $1 million.
Okay, because I was just wondering if, if there's any, it doesn't sound like anybody's discussed whether or not there's an option to maybe increase the revenues. How could we increase the revenues? We're all looking at the expense side, and I'm just curious about the revenue side.
Contract through 2028.
Yeah, we just increased the revenue. It used to be somewhere in the vicinity of about 40 to 45. We just increased it to $100,000 a year.
So then the options, John, that you're talking about are gonna be. This is a big maintenance opportunity versus, I guess, the sales side, you're gonna look at who's gonna potentially block that. Is that correct?
Yeah, the 300 and something thousand we had in that reserve fund is basically what we collected and saved from for years. So
Correct.
it's,
No, the question I'm asking is the plans you guys are putting in place, the options as to what to do. Correct? You're looking at potential, not only maintenance, but equipment that's gonna be needed, but you're also, I'm sorry, I thought I heard that potentially selling the track was an option. And that, John, I thought you were
I
gonna,
think that's one of the options.
I think that
Abandonment is another option. Repairing the, trying to get a train on the, I mean, there are a bunch of options. We need to look at what makes most sense.
I'll add on to, and just so Christina, you're probably not aware of it, but several years ago, before Rev Rail came on board, we did put out an RFP for either to sell the track or for somebody to run the track. And we had several submittals. One of the ones that had submitted, fairly quickly pulled out of it after they submitted. So now we're not gonna do it. So there was really a loss of interest, and that allowed us, at least allowed Rev Rail to use the track that would bring us some income. But we've tried it once already. We can certainly try it again, but it's not my decision, it's up to them. But we just didn't get a lot of takers last time.
all right.
Stay tuned.
I think it's an option that should be explored. Again, didn't somebody tell me that somebody else sold part of the tracks?
It went through bankruptcy proceedings in Essex County on the Sanford line that eventually the high bidder couldn't come up with the funding, so the next highest bidder was Revolution Rail. And they purchased the track, I think, for $300,000.
Thought it was more than that.
It was less than the $3 million that the original bidder had put out.
Out of that bankruptcy out in Colorado, there was an initial offer of a few million for that section of tracks, and they didn't, the people who made that offer at the bankruptcy sale didn't come up with the money when they had to, and the trustee didn't give them any slack on coming up with it or any excuses. The trustee went right to the next highest bidder, which was
At a significantly reduced cost, at a price.
oh, it was a definitely much lower
It was
price.
significantly lower.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
How long was that line that they bought?
About like 29, 30 miles.
Yeah, I want to say somewhere in that vicinity was the Sanford line.
30 miles.
We've got 40.
Yeah, 40 miles.
The bid that they lost was how many millions of dollars?
3 million. It was no more than 3 million, as I recall,
I don't think it was even that much.
right?
Half or something, or it was a huge, what seemed like a really great amount of money. The trustee was quite happy with that offer. But after making the offer at the bankruptcy sale, the trustee, they didn't follow through and make payment as they were supposed to, according to the bankruptcy court order. So the trustee then, as he went right to the next highest bidder.
So ours would actually have quite a bit of larger value because of, well, I mean, look at where it starts and where it ends. I mean, we've got probably a significant advantage over that piece of rail. But
I think one of the options may be that you'll articulate is to maybe put out a feeler, put out a request to see.
well, the only downside is you lose that for the snowmobiles. That's a great track and that's a great tourism incentive for the snowmobiles if they have such a distance that they can ride.
Yeah, that's part of the equation, the economic benefits or cost, whatever, right? In the mix.
And what are our chances of ever leasing it to another entity that would do a train?
You want my opinion? Slim to none. Slim to none.
So what were those rails worth if you were to take them up and put down some kind of,
Scrap metal.
yeah.
Just to add this on, we looked at this several years ago because another supervisor had looked at saying, why don't we have a 40-mile multi-use path.
I use that.
So we looked at the scrap. We talked with several contractors and you would get probably from the steel that's in there about $3 million. You would lose that in the disposal of the ties and such that are still there because of the environmental issues associated with it. So, but that was an option that was brought up several years ago, is why not turn it into a bike path? And I think the cost was somewhere in the 40 to $50 million range.
For bike path?
To
Based
remove
on
the rails.
remove, well, all of it together, remove rail,
Everything,
remove
everything.
ties. You know,
Reclaim
it's
land.
reclaim your a significant amount of wetland impacts and such through that entire area. All the bridges, you could certainly leave the bridges in place, but they'd all have to be boarded because they're all open bridges. So that's a significant cost. That, like that.
Open bridges, there are no rails on each side of the bridge. It just,
Also. clean size.
You know, for some of us that have been here, this is like deja vu.
It's never ended.
So it's complicated and, but I think that, maybe we have the players, the agents now to, maybe, look this forward a little bit.
Yep.
Okay. We'll stay tuned. We'll be back just with what our options are. Next one.
We're moving on to DBW right now. So the
Madam
first item we have on DBW is a miscellaneous resolution to amend resolution of 167 of 2024. You'll see that that resolution is attached, and that was creating the position of the fiscal manager number 2, as well as the fiscal manager temporary. We did not have to have the position of the fiscal manager 2, so this resolution would be to amend that and delete that creating of a fiscal manager 2. And as you all recall, Supervisor Diamond had asked why we would have 2 fiscal managers, and I said that we would certainly delete the other one because it was not needed. So, so we're going to delete the fiscal manager 2 that was created. That's the amendment.
We'll bring this forward. Mr. Bruno, Mr. Strainer on the second. Any discussion?
Excuse me.
There being none, if we're ready for the question, all those in favor of this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Next item we have on there is a resolution to award a contract for the Corinth Road over Clendon Brook. The bids did come in on the 20th of June. We have an apparent low bidder, which I will have before board meeting, but we had to get approval through DOT first. So this is, it'll be determined, but I will have a bid sheet for the board meeting.
Have this brought forward, Mr. Strainer, Mr. Bruno, second. And you'll have that information to
For the board meeting.
for the
Yep.
full-
Yep.
Are we ready for the question then?
Yep.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They carried. Next item, Kevin.
Last item we have on there is the request is a miscellaneous request to repeal local law number 2 of 2008, which was the MS4 program, municipal stormwater program, and then create a new local law. I had assumed we could amend that. Jim Leroom, who was here for last committee and talked about it. Since that, we've had discussions with the county attorney's office and they just want to create a new local law. In all reality, the local law is not going to change the one that you see that is attached to this. The only difference is that the permit number will change with DEC and the stormwater management officer is now called a stormwater program coordinator.
We do different titles.
Yes, different titles. So those 2 things will change. And of course, we will have a public hearing at the board meeting for this is for the local law.
And if the new local law be a lot similar to the old one, it actually kind of just like this one from 2008 followed the model law put out by the DEC, which they like everybody to use with it. The updates are, as Superintendent Akers mentioned, permit numbers are different because the DEC has new permit numbers now. And the title of the stormwater coordinator change to it. And I would like to include in the new one sentence that the new local law repeals this law from 2008.
All right. Mr. Bruno, moving it forward. Second. Second, Mr. Mayday, any further discussion? There being none, we're ready for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
of
Aye.
this, say aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next item, Kevin.
Last item we had on there was discussion updates, project or discussion items for project updates. As you all know, we're in construction season. A lot of projects are moving forward. Couple of them have finished. River Street up in Warrensburg have finished. We're waiting on some striping. A couple of the other projects are just waiting on striping as well. I hope to come back next committee in July, and we would be pretty much wrapped up with all the road projects this year, except for a few minor ones. So I will bring that back next committee and have pictures for all the projects that were completed.
Okay, do you want to mention anything about the use of the bridge up on Comstock?
So.
We're in the process of retaining engineering and we did soil, we're
Yes.
spending money.
I can talk to it real quick. So as you're all aware, I had asked all the towns, there's about 12 bridges that are not owned by Warren County. They're owned by towns, whether it be the town of Bolton, town of Johnsburg, town of Chester, whoever it may be. I had stated in one of our committee meetings that as we have already taken over in the past other town bridges, I'd certainly be open to taking over any town bridges that the town still currently have of those 12 bridges, providing they were brought up to our standard. So I know that the town of Hague has had several replacements. And I know that Stony Creek's got a couple. And I know that Ron's got one up on Paynerum Road. We already have 2 bridges up on Paynerum Road. Ron is actually going to use our bridge that we had for another project that it didn't work. And he's going to use that up on Paynerum Road. He's going to have the bridge installed with his contractor, and his consultant's going to do the design. And then we would take over that bridge. So he's in the process of doing the engineer consultant work with their engineers. They're gonna go out, they gotta go out and do soil borings and such, but it's a perfect fit for his. So that certainly is one that we had ordered. It didn't work in the situation we had. It was gonna be for another Paynerum Road bridge until DEC changed their mind on what they wanted. So certainly Ron could use the bridge and then we would take over that bridge. But Ron's covering the cost of all the construction, everything to the bridge. And then eventually we would take it over. And what I would certainly do is I'm gonna come back to committee to tell what bridge that we have accepted. There are certain ones that I'm not gonna accept until they're brought up to our standards. That just because I don't have the money to be able to do it myself.
Okay, anything else, Kevin?
That's it.
Anything else come before the committee? Anyone from the audience wish to address the committee at this time? All right, Chair, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Move, Mr. Mayday, Mr. Bruno on the second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.